Fellas, what's going on? Um, just make sure everything's working quickly. All right. Let's make sure this is set. Um, let's just set that quickly. Let's pull this up. My bad, boys. I'm just pulling some things up quickly, making sure everything's good. All right. There we go. All right. What's going on, boys? Welcome to the stream. I apologize. I'm a little bit late today. Usually I like to stream at 8 p.m. Eastern time on weekdays, but we got on a little bit late, 30 minutes later. Man, I need a haircut. But yeah, so there's not too much news that came out yesterday or much to talk about, really. The one thing that I did want to talk about is this upcoming card during UFC Nashville, Derek Lewis versus Taliesin Teixeira. I was getting a lot of feedback on my video about Taliesin versus Derek Lewis, and a lot of you guys, or I don't know if you guys in the stream, but a lot of fans that were watching that video were talking about how they thought Derek Lewis is going to win, and Taliesin hasn't been tested or anything like that, which is fair. But one thing that I just did want to bring up is I don't personally think experience is a true determining factor. Of course, it could be. We have seen it in the past where someone may look really good when they're fighting not so great fighters, but when that level of competition raises, we really see how good that fighter really is. And of course, that is true in some cases. But in my opinion, there's just certain guys that you see and you can just tell. Obviously, not with 100% certainty or with 100% accuracy. But for example, a guy like Gene Silva. I always thought Gene Silva was really good. He hasn't really been tested yet. His best fight or his toughest task, yet is either against Drew Dober or Bryce Mitchell, whatever you want to say, probably Drew Dober. But regardless, that's not a super high level of competition. His next fight is against Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez is a significantly better fighter than anybody that he went up against. But I don't think just because that is the case, that means that Gene Silva is not a good fighter. You fight who's in front of you, and your experience comes as you get more fights in the UFC. So the fact that a lot of people are saying Taliesin is going to lose just based off lack of experience is something that I just don't personally agree with. John, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. But yeah. He made a video on why he hates the No, I actually don't know him. That's pretty funny though. I know you were talking about the GOAT convo and then how it's silly. But yeah, I mean, listen, I agree. Everybody has their own GOATs, their top whatever, top 5, top 10, whatever. But whatever. If you need to talk about later this stream, you should react to it. All right, good idea, actually. Good idea. Let's see. Let me pull that up possibly. Are you an MMA fighter? No, I'm not. Let's see. Let me throw that up actually for later. I was going to react to one video ranking Tom Aspinall's future opponents, but I could certainly pull that one up as well. Let's see. The GOAT debate sucks. Here we go. All right, yeah, that's a good video. Thanks for the advice. I'll be reacting to that later in the stream. But yeah, so I guess my point is for the Derek Lewis fight, Derek Lewis obviously has a lot of power, but over the years, I just don't think Derek Lewis is a guy that experience is really going to benefit him more so than another guy, for example. And the reason why I'm saying that is for Derek Lewis, he needs to land a big shot. If he lands it, he'll knock out anybody. He'll knock out a horse. But if he's not able to land that big shot, it doesn't matter what his experience is. We really haven't seen improvement over the years from Derek Lewis. He's just a guy. I think he's a guy who could have been good. I think he has really good, when he's on top of guys on the ground, he has ridiculous ground and pound. And I think if he worked on his wrestling, he could have been a decent wrestler. He's also very athletic for how he looks and his size and whatever. So I think Derek Lewis could have been better than he was, but he really never worked on those things, or at least looked to implement some of those things in the fight. So in my opinion, based upon that and based upon the fact that Taliesin is so much longer than Derek Lewis is going to be, he's also going to hit really hard. And there's an argument to be made that Taliesin has a better chin than Derek Lewis does. I kind of just think this is going to be a brawl early on, round 1, round 2, but it's probably going to be a first round finish, in my opinion, for Taliesin Teixeira. But listen, if Derek Lewis lands a right hand, he'll knock out anybody. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, so before we got into anything else, I just wanted to look at this full card and give my final predictions for all of these fights upcoming. In terms of betting, I mean, I could look through the betting markets as well, but in my opinion, I don't necessarily think I'm going to be betting this weekend. There's just a couple bets that I like, but nothing worthwhile in my opinion. But yeah, so starting off with Mitch Ramirez and Mike Davis, this has to be a fight that Mike Davis wins. In his last fight versus Yam, he looked very terrible. The thing about Mike Davis is I think he's really good. He has good striking. He has skill on the ground. He's a decent wrestler. The problem with Mike Davis is he just never fights. He's way too inactive, and I think that really showed in his last fight against what's his face? I literally just said it. But whatever his name is, he really showed up in his last fight. Let me just figure this out. Against Ziam. That's what it was. But yeah, it really showed in his fight against Ziam. But against an opponent like Rich Ramirez, I definitely think Mike Davis has a pretty decent edge. He certainly should win this on the betting markets. They agree. He's a pretty big favorite. I believe a -1,000 or maybe even higher than that for Mike Davis. So definitely a fight that Mike Davis should win. Hopefully he looks back to his old form, because as I said, I thought he looked very good in some of his previous fights, and I thought he was a really good fighter. Then we have Kennedy versus Volter Walker. I think Kennedy's probably going to win. I'm not high in Kennedy. I'm definitely not high in Volter. But I think Kennedy probably just has a little bit more skill. On the feet, obviously, he's going to have a significant advantage. In terms of the wrestling, Walter's probably going to be better, or Walker's probably going to be better than Kennedy. But, it's not like Volter has amazing takedowns or anything like that. And on the feet, he's a little bit lost in my opinion. So I kind of just think Kennedy's going to be able to stop takedowns, keep the fight on the feet, and just be able to have success and find his way to a decision victory. That's kind of how I see that one. For Jake Matthews and Chidi and Joanniani, for Chidi, I know he did miss weight, so that could potentially be a factor, but I'm still leaning with Chidi winning this fight. You do have to. The one thing I will say about Chidi is you do have to worry about him quitting. He has done that in the past. But in this fight against Jake Matthews, I'm really not too high on Jake. I kind of think the best aspect of Jake's game is he's pretty durable. But outside of that, I don't think he does anything very well. And I think Chidi is going to have an advantage on the feet and maybe even on the ground if he wanted to take the fight there. But probably just going to be a stand-up battle between these two. And I see Chidi winning via TKO. He is very explosive, and he hits pretty hard as well. So I'll go with Chidi via TKO. Then we have Max Griffin and Chris Curtis. I'm certainly leaning Chris Curtis pretty heavily here. The only thing that I will say about Chris Curtis, something that Max could potentially look to exploit, is Curtis is pretty good in boxing range. He certainly is. But the problem with him is if guys have any sort of movement at all, that's really where he struggles. We've seen it a bunch of times throughout his UFC career, and really in most of his losses, he's lost because guys were utilizing movement. Now, obviously, it's a very simple fix to that, just cut off the cage a little bit more effectively, but it just seems like Chris Curtis just gets frustrated in there, and he just refuses to make adjustments in there. So if Max Griffin is looking to utilize if he's looking to utilize footwork, I do think that, he can have some success. But overall, I'm leaning Chris Curtis via a decision. Let me just throw your comment up quickly. Um, there we go. Um, Kaio or Imavov? Um, that's a great question, honestly. First of all, welcome to the stream, brother. It's a tough fight. I mean, I know a lot of people are leaning with Imavov. Imavov is legitimately like very good. His striking is really good. He also has a very fast hands, and I think the best part of his striking game is Imavov has a really good ability to just strike at a certain pace and all of a sudden throw a combination at like three times the speed of some of his other shots. And I think that does a really good job at just catching guys off guard. I think we saw that with Izzy. I think we saw that with some of Imavov's other opponents, and the changing of speed that Imavov possesses, I think, is his best aspect of his striking game. For Borralho, I mean, on the feet, he definitely does have skill. He is pretty defensively sound, so maybe he'll be able to avoid some of the shots. It's going to be a southpaw versus orthodox matchup between these two. But for for Kaio, I believe what he's going to want to do is try to take the fight to the ground. Yes, Imavov does have some wrestling ability, but Kaio is probably going to have the advantage in that realm. So, in my opinion, it's a really tough fight to pick. Maybe I would lean a little bit towards Imavov, but I do think Kaio is still pretty live. He obviously has a ridiculously big head. Probably could take some shots pretty well. Also, on top of that, being pretty defensively sound. So on the feet, I don't know how much Imavov's going to be able to do, but he is a good striker and he does do a great job at catching guys off guard. So to answer your question in a very long way, I guess I would lean towards Imavov, but close one. I wouldn't be surprised if Kaio was able to pull out a victory there. But next, talking about this upcoming card, we have Junior Tafa and Tuco. Listen, I've talked about Junior Tafa a bunch of times. I really don't think he's good at all. But in this fight, I think I lean a little bit towards Tafa. I'm also just really not high at all on Tuco either. So I would lean towards Junior Tafa via decision. He just doesn't hit hard enough to get a finish, in my opinion, at least in this matchup. Then we have Vitor Petrino versus Austin Lane. This is just a guaranteed finish, in my opinion. Two guys that I don't think are very good. Two guys, well, at least for Austin Lane, he has really no chin whatsoever. I think he should consider retirement at this point. I mean, I know it's very easy for me to say, but for a guy like Austin Lane or maybe some other guys in the UFC that I think should probably retire, obviously maybe they have financial issues or whatever, and maybe they have to keep fighting. But in my opinion, I just feel like Austin Lane takes way too much damage. He gets knocked out, it seems, all the time. But in all the fights that he's in, or most of the fights he's in, it seems like Austin Lane does have a lot of success. So listen, both of these guys aren't good, but I think Petrino's going to eventually find a big hook or a big right hand or something like that, some big shot that knocks out Austin Lane. But I wouldn't be surprised if Lane had some success early. But yeah, my official prediction for that is Vitor by, let's say, second round TKO. That's what I see for that one. Then next we have Nate Landwehr versus Morgan Charrier. This one's going to be a really fun one, a very high action packed fight. We have Nate Landwehr, who always pushes a pace, always has really fun fights, and I believe he's going to be trying to get in that boxing range. And if he is able to, I think he'll be able to have a lot of success, maybe tire out Charrier, and maybe even find the victory in the end. And for Charrier, I mean, he's a very explosive striker. His boxing's not really all that good. His striking is mostly just his kicks, his body kicks, his leg kicks, sometimes even head kicks. So I think he's going to try to keep the fight on the feet and keep the fight at range. I think that's really what Charrier is going to do. But I'm going with the underdog in this one. My official prediction for this matchup is Nate Landwehr via decision. I think Nate's just going to be able to get in that boxing range, be able to, land a bunch of shots throughout the course of the fight, maybe start to tire out Charrier a little bit as the fight does progress. And maybe once we get to the tail end of the second round or maybe even the third round, we might see a Charrier that's starting to get tired out there. So I'm leaning with Nate Landwehr via decision, and he's the underdog in that one. Next, we have Calvin Kattar versus Steve Garcia. I think the fight of the night is almost guaranteed to be Calvin Kattar versus Garcia or Nate Landwehr versus Charrier. Of course, the main event is is definitely going to be a finish as well, so that could be a good one. But in my opinion, one of these two fights, Kattar or Landwehr fight, is probably going to be the fight of the night. But for this fight, you have Calvin Kattar, a pretty slick boxer, and you have Steve Garcia, a guy that just pushes forward a lot and throws bombs. So I think this fight's going to be really good. But I'm kind of leaning towards Calvin Kattar a little bit. Yes, he did lose a couple of his fights. Recently, he lost to Aljamain Sterling by essentially just getting out wrestled. But Steve Garcia is not the same opponent whatsoever. So I kind of think Cater's a little bit of a slicker boxer. I think he's going to be able to take some of the shots from Garcia and avoid some of the shots that Garcia throws, and I think he'll be able to counter effectively. So Calvin, I believe, is the underdog as well in this matchup, and I'm leaning towards Calvin Cater. What's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. We're just talking about my final predictions for this upcoming UFC Nashville card. But next, we move on to the co-main event: Wonderboy Thompson versus Gabriel Bonfim. For this fight, I think Bonfim's probably going to win. He's probably just going to take down Wonderboy and submit him. I've talked about a couple times in the past how I thought that Wonderboy may be able to have some success in this fight, and I do believe that it probably is true. If he is able to stop takedowns, I think he'll have success, and I think he has a real chance of winning. It's just the thing is, Wonderboy in the past has always struggled with, wrestlers and getting taken down and whatnot. So I do think Bonfim, at the end of it, is probably going to be able to take him down and find a submission. Um, but yeah, give me juicy lore. Good questions. Good questions. So, other comment up on screen. Oh man, I keep doing that. But my motivations. Well, I started this channel about 2 years ago, I think, at this point, or maybe it was even 3 years ago. And my just give me some background why I'm called Juicy MMA. When I was in elementary school, actually, a really long time ago, one of my friends called me Juicy, and I might as well full screen this because it's cut off. But yeah, so one of my friends called me Juicy in elementary school, and the name kind of just stuck. So that's been my nickname forever. And with these, YouTube channels, I started originally with an NBA channel, Juicy Sports, but I kind of gave up on that a little bit and moved on to this channel, Juicy MMA, as I'm just a little bit more interested in MMA at this point. And yeah, that's where my name comes from. My goal is just to become as good of a YouTuber as I possibly can. Obviously, I'm pushing, a lot harder. At this point, I'm doing a lot of live streams every week, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm posting twice a week at this point, 2 videos a week. I'm going to try to up that to 3. I think after next week, I'm going to change my schedule to 3 uploads a week. So yeah, that's where I am with that. And my goal is just, as I said, become the best YouTuber I can, grow along the way. And yeah, just talk about MMA with you guys. But yeah. Did he clinch his No, he did not. He did not. But nice. Big butt. What's going on? What's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. But yeah, I might as well just leave this full screen. But anyways, going back to final predictions for this upcoming card tomorrow, actually. So for the Wonderboy fight against Gabriel, I think Wonderboy has a real chance if he's able to keep the fight on the feet. But that is a big what if. I think Gabriel is probably gonna, just find a takedown and submit Wonderboy. So my official prediction for that fight is probably gonna be Bonfim via a, let's say second round submission. That's my prediction for that. And then for the main event, I've gotten a bunch of comments on the short, on the video. A lot of people thinking that Derek Lewis is going to win this fight based on Taliesin not really having much experience. But in my opinion, I'm still leaning towards Taliesin Teixeira. Derek Lewis at this point, he kind of is who he is. He hits really hard, yes, but he doesn't have too much skill. He's going to get into a brawl, and if he lands a shot first, he'll win, obviously. But a lot of times he gets landed on first, and he got finished a couple times in some of his more recent fights against Tai Tuivasa. That was a while ago at this point. But against him, against some other guys, and that's kind of the problem with Derek Lewis. He's been fighting forever. Yes, he does have a lot of experience. That is true. But he really hasn't made any sort of improvement. I think he could have. I honestly think he could be pretty good if he worked on his game a little bit more, maybe, put more work into his game. I think his wrestling could potentially be a real asset to him. When he's on top, he has ridiculous ground and pound shots. But he just hasn't done all those things. He kind of just is a brawling kind of fighter, and if he lands first, he'll win. If he doesn't, he'll lose. So I kind of just think this fight between Lewis and Teixeira is going to be a brawl. I think the length of Teixeira is going to be big. Even in the clinch, I think Teixeira has an advantage with those elbows. So I'm leaning towards Talison Teixeira via a first round TKO. That's what I'm leaning towards. But of course, I could be wrong, obviously. But we'll see what happens. I'm leaning towards Talison though. Gabriel's number 2 on my 2 and 5 on my GOAT list. Very nice, very nice. He's up there. He's definitely up there. Oh man, just realized something in my teeth. Um, but um, but yeah, so those are my predictions for this upcoming weekend. In terms of bets, as I said, um, you know, I don't. There's like a couple bets that I kind of like, but there's nothing that I absolutely love. So I think personally I might stay out of this card. I don't really think I'm going to take any bets. For next weekend, there's a couple more bets that I like for UFC 318, but even then, there's nothing that I absolutely love. So, I don't know. Um, if Derek lands a hard punch, he wins the fight against Teixeira. Yeah, I would agree. If he lands a huge shot, I mean, he hits really hard. Obviously, he can probably knock out a horse, as I said. So, if he's able to land a big right hand, I would probably agree. He'll probably find a knockout. He's the knockout leader at this point. He hits really hard, obviously, but I just don't know you know, if that's going to happen, in my opinion. But yeah, so anyways, bringing up decked. All right, let's bring this up quickly. So just bringing up, some of these betting lines. There's just like, there's just not much that I really like here. I think Mike Davis is going to win, but at -1,000, obviously you can't take that. I think Kennedy's probably going to win, but at -210, I can't take that, and I don't think Kennedy's that good either. So I'm definitely not taking that. Chidi at -158, maybe there's some value there. I do think he's going to win. The line is not too crazy, so maybe there's some value there. But Chidi did miss weight, and also he does sometimes quit. I don't know if he's going to quit against Jake Matthews, but he does sometimes quit. So getting him at -158 maybe isn't the best idea in the world either. But I mean, maybe value there, but I'm personally not taking it. I just want to let you know. He's got Derek Lewis, Wonderboy Garcia, Nate by round 2 submission. Nate by round 2 submission. I could actually see that. Then Nate by round 2 submission. Listen, from a betting perspective, Wonderboy, I would agree. As I said, I'm probably not betting this weekend because I don't love anything. But if I were betting this weekend, I probably would take Wonderboy at that premium. You're getting him at +300, and if he is able to stop takedowns, if he is able to stop takedowns, I think he'll have success on the feet. So yeah, I mean, it's probably not best. It's probably not a bad idea. That's fair. That's fair analysis, actually. But yeah, so in this fight, I think Chris Curtis is going to win, but at -300, there's really no value there unless you parlay him up with somebody else. But yeah. Then Junior Tafa. I mean, I think Tafa's probably going to win, but I also think he's terrible. So, taking him at plus or at minus money, especially -176, I don't think is something I'm willing to do. Then Petrino, -750. Yeah, he's going to win, but, at -750, there's no value there. And Petrino by KO is probably, -230. Petrino by KO. So there's really no value there. Nate Landwehr, this is probably the best value on the card, I would say. This is one that I think could be good. I think Nate has a real chance of winning. And you said via round 2 submission, plus 4,800. That's probably pretty good value, actually. And him in general by submission is plus 1,500, which is also really good value. Even Nate Landwehr by points at plus 450 is not bad. So yeah, listen, as I said, I'm not betting, but if I were, I'd probably take money line, Nate Landwehr money line, and maybe you can go with submission or something, something like that. Chris Curtis, yeah, doesn't matter. Um, I agree. Chris Curtis definitely should win this fight. I definitely agree. The only thing I'll say, he just struggles so much with movement. So if what's his face? If Max Griffin can utilize movement, maybe he can have success. But Chris Curtis definitely should win this fight. I agree with you. I hope Petrino. Yeah. Listen, I actually thought Petrino could have been good as well before the Anthony Smith fight, but um, it just seems like his IQ is like pretty low. He hits really hard. It seems like he has a pretty good chin. He has pretty good intangibles. I will say that. But the problem with Petrino is, I mean, I think he's going to win this fight. He's almost guaranteed to get a knockout here against Austin Lane. Austin is just so hittable and his chin's not good. But going forward from here, though, I just don't know. I don't know. I think his IQ maybe is just a little bit too low, and we'll see. I mean, obviously he can make improvements. It was a pretty ridiculous low IQ moment against Anthony Smith, but of course you could make improvements, and we'll see where it goes from there. But in terms of the intangibles, Petrino has a lot of really good ones. Hits really hard and can take a shot pretty well, it seems. So we'll see where he goes from here. But yeah, and then this line actually widened it out even. So from a betting perspective, I'd probably go with Wonder Boy. As I said, I think Bonfim's probably going to win, but just based on the value here, plus 330, I'd probably lean with Wonder Boy as a decent bet against all the blobs. I see him. Yeah, that's a good call. It actually. The MMA casual. By the way, welcome to the stream. I didn't say that, but that's a good call. It actually. The heavyweight division is just full of blobs. Actually, let's look through it. It's probably a good idea that he moves up to to heavyweight. But yeah, so the only guys that I consider to actually be good in the heavyweight division is Tom Aspinall, Gane, Volkov, Curtis Blades, Almeida, and maybe you can throw Sergey Pavlovich. But I think he's pretty one-dimensional, even talking about Sergey. But outside of that, I don't think any of these other guys are all that good. And as you pointed out accurately, I think that's why Waldo Cortez is at number 6 at this point. I really don't think he's good whatsoever. I think he just has a good chin, is relatively fast for heavyweight, and hits decently hard. That's why he's able to get to 6. And maybe for Petrino, I think maybe he can get to a similar level. Maybe he can beat some guys just because he hits hard and has a good chin. So you're probably right. It probably was a good move that he moves up to heavyweight and maybe can have some success here. I agree. I'm really low on Mick Parkin. I don't think he's very good. He kind of gassed out in like a round, and he doesn't hit that hard. His wrestling's not that good. His striking's not that good. I think Petrino could probably win that fight. I don't think Mick is really all that great, to be honest. Yeah, so it's a fair point. Maybe he can make it into, I don't know, top 10 of heavyweight. It's just heavyweight's so bad. I mean, Tai Tuivasa's number 10 guy. Nothing against Tai Tuivasa. His run was very exciting when he was just knocking everybody out. But he's just so one-dimensional. At this point, he's just way too fat. He's too fat for heavyweight, which is, that's something. But outside of his, him going into brawls and hitting really hard and having a pretty good leg kick, he really doesn't have much else. He just gets taken down and submitted. But I just want to say, okay, let's do anything. Let's give that. Yeah, that's pretty crazy, actually. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, I think he kind of showed almost in his performance against Tybura. It just didn't look good at all. I mean, as I said, he kind of gassed out in a round and a half. So his cardio wasn't there. He doesn't hit very hard. His wrestling's not great. So I'm definitely not high on Mick Parkin. And losing to Tybura, nothing against Tybura, but at this point he's pretty old, and it's not like he has any spectacular skills or anything like that. So if you're in a competitive fight and you've been losing to Tybura, I don't think you're really going to be a top 5 guy or anybody that would get anywhere near the belt, in my opinion. So, yeah, I do agree. I'm really not too high on Mick. Um, but yeah, so just going back over to the odds, and then so yeah, so as I said, I'll probably take Wonderboy Thompson if I were to bet this week. Um, but it's just a play based on value at plus 330. I think there's maybe some value there, but outside of that, I think I don't think he's going to win if I had to give my official prediction. But for the main event, Towson to share at minus 290. There's no value there. Towson by KO at minus 155. Also no value there. If you really wanted to bet Towson, you can probably just do where is it? Towson by round 1 KO at plus 165. But even that's really not good either. This is probably just a pass. There's no real value on this main event, I think. So yeah, there's just not a lot of value as a whole. So just to reiterate, the only possible value that I would see for this card is Chidi money line, Nate Landwehr money line, maybe even Nate Landwehr submission, and then maybe Wonder Boy money line, and that's it. Maybe you can, if you really wanted to bet something else, maybe you could do Towson Teixeira parlayed with Chris Curtis. I mean, I think both of these guys are going to win. They definitely should win. You parlay those two guys up, you get minus 127. Maybe you could put a couple units on that. But outside of that, just not really much. So, as I said, I'm probably not going to be betting this card. I just don't really want to force anything at this point. But yeah, that's kind of my thinking. So that's what we have for this upcoming card. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is Imavov and Borralho. Imavov was, kind of saying that he's gonna have an easy time with Borralho. That Borralho is getting backed up by Alex Pereira, and Imavov is gonna have a lot of success. Listen, that fight is actually a really tough one for me to pick. If I had to say, I mean, I probably would lean towards Imavov. He does have really good striking, as I touched upon before. His change of speed, I think, on the feet is probably his best weapon. He is technical on the feet, of course, but his change of pace is a huge one. I think we saw that in the Adesanya fight, where he's striking at a certain pace, and all of a sudden he'll throw like a 2 or 3 punch combination, throwing his shots like 3 times the speed of what he was doing before. And I think that change of speed really throws off a lot of guys, and that's where he's able to land some of his bigger shots. That's how he was able to hurt Cannonier. And technically, he finished Cannonier, but I thought it was a pretty bad stoppage. But regardless, he did hurt Cannonier pretty significantly, and that change of speed was the reason why he was able to land that shot. And as I said, also against Adesanya, also against some other guys. So I do think that's going to be an issue possibly for Borralho, but Borralho is pretty defensively sound on the feet. Striking is all right, nothing to write home about. But I think what Borralho is probably going to want to do is take the fight to the ground. I think that's really where he'll have his advantage. But yeah. I think striking the end of exchanges and get the decision pretty easily. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. He's certainly going to have a pretty big advantage on the feet. Borralho, it seems like he's just kind of, like relatively new to striking. It just, there's some things about his striking that look pretty good in my opinion. I mean, as I said, he's pretty defensively sound. He has some decent aspects of his striking, but it just seems like it's just not there yet. So I agree. I think Imavov's going to have a pretty big advantage on the feet, and I wouldn't be surprised if he wins by decision, or as you said, if he wins by TKO. But by the way, welcome to the stream, brother. Thanks for joining. But yeah, I would probably say, if I had to say, I'd probably say Imavov by decision, just because I think he's probably going to land a lot of shots on the feet. The only thing is Borralho has, the biggest head I've ever seen. So I think he'll be able to take a bunch of shots. But we'll see. I mean, if he is able to take the fight to the ground, maybe he can tire out Borralho. Maybe he can threaten submissions. But we'll see. He hasn't been in the cage for a while, though. Might have improved since Cannonier. That's true. That is true. I thought the Cannonier fight was by far Borralho's best performance. His striking looked a lot better, actually, in that fight as compared to some of his other fights. And yes, you're right. He hasn't been in the cage in a while. It's kind of a double-edged sword, though. On one hand, he could have got obviously a lot better. Maybe he'll he'll make significant improvements. And going into this fight against Imavov, we'll see a different version of Kaio, which is possible. I mean, he's still a pretty young fighter. But on the other hand, we could see some ring rust from Borralho because it has been a long time since we saw him last. Actually, I'm curious. When was that fight? Um, let's see. It was a while ago. It was August of 2024, so almost a year ago. And this upcoming fight is in a little bit from now. Yeah, so probably be like around a year. It's my oh man, dude, every stream, bro. My my computer always tweaks out, bro. I'm trying to get a new computer, so I don't have I don't have these issues, but yeah, it just like overheats a little bit, and at certain moments it'll just tweak out. But anyways, so yeah, by the time that we see Kaio next in France, it's going to be basically a year since he last fought, which is a decent amount of time. So we'll see how he looks. But I mean, it's not necessarily his fault. He's been wanting to fight some guys. It just seems like he couldn't get the fights. He wanted to fight Imavov in an earlier date, but Imavov didn't want to at that time. But we're getting the fight now, so it's fine. Um, John's nervous again. Um, but fighters don't need to improve anymore. So, running on the job, improvements in training methods. That's fair. That is fair. Um, yeah, that's fair. Especially for like younger guys like Borralho. I mean, I'm sure we're going to see improvements from him. But yeah, I know Dana always talks about ring rust and whatever if you don't fight for a long time. I think there is some credence to that. Some of the guys that we see, maybe they'll add some techniques and maybe they'll be an overall better fighter, but it could be a little bit different. Well, obviously, it's a lot different when you're fighting a guy in the octagon as compared to in training. But I do agree with you for the most part, though, that especially for younger guys and with new training methods and the vast amount of training partners that a lot of these gyms have, being able to implement some things that their opponent does well, or imitate some things that their opponents does well, it definitely leads to a lot of improvement for some of these UFC fighters. So I would agree with you overall. And I think the level of the UFC where we're at now is just very high. It seems like every so often we see one new technique or one new quote unquote meta that turns out to be super effective. And then we see another meta to try to stop that. So fighters are just constantly making improvements, constantly getting better, constantly adding things to their game. And I think some of these gyms are a real reason for that. Sometimes when you see guys fight like Jamal Hill, actually, I think is a great example. When you talk about a guy like Jamal Hill who fights in a pretty small camp, I think it's just a lot harder to make those same improvements. For Jamal Hill, yes, I mean, he could make improvements, obviously. I mean, he's made improvements like from when he originally got to the UFC and now. Of course, I'm not saying no. But since he fights at a smaller gym, he doesn't have the vast amount of coaches at his disposal. He doesn't have the training partners at his disposal, at least high-level training partners. And I think we really see the effects of that with some of the lack of improvements with Jamal Hill. I'm not saying that's the only reason. Maybe it's in part due to him, some things that he's doing or not doing. But I think when you talk about guys that fight at like bigger gyms or at least at gyms that have a lot more training partners, it really does lead to a lot of improvement. So yeah, so that's a good call out. And for Kaio, I mean, he doesn't fight at like a huge gym, but the Fighting Nerds appears to be a pretty good gym. A lot of the guys that go there are looking to make a lot of improvements. But for Kaio, he also fights. He doesn't just fight at the Fighting Nerds, so he has other guys that he can get in there with and other sparring partners he can get in there with. So yeah, he'll probably look to make improvements for sure. But yeah, so I wanted to let's see. Do you think it's crazy that we don't see more body shot TKOs? Rocks, lower guessing. Yeah, I think it is kind of crazy. I mean, I think the only guy that really looks to utilize body shots like very effectively, or at least two guys that come to my mind are Taporia. He does a great job at throwing that body shot in combination. And besides him, the other guy that does it very well is Joshua Van. I'm sure I'm forgetting about certain guys that have a great body shot, but for the most part, you really don't see it too much. I mean, you see body kicks, you see blast body kicks. Um, and stuff like that. But um, you know, we don't see too many body shot TKOs. It is fair. Um, Holloway does it great. Yeah, Holloway also is another guy that has a really nice body shot. But yeah, MMA, I guess, is a little bit different at this point where, they're not different, but at this point, we don't see too many guys like Deporia or Holloway or Joshua Van that really look to put body shots in the middle of their combinations. A lot of the times when guys put combos together, it's kind of just all to the head, hooks, uppercuts, whatever, elbows maybe. But yeah, I do think the body shot is something that guys don't go to as much. And as you said, it would force guys to have their hands a little bit lower and just make it a little bit easier to maybe land head kicks, and it just opens up a lot of things. Um, but yeah, I would probably agree that that body shots should be something that's a little bit more utilized in MMA. Um, but yeah. Um, but what else? What else? So one thing that I just wanted to do quickly, let me just pull this up. I wanted to react to a video talking about Tom Aspinall's or ranking Tom Aspinall's future opponents, just because I've talked about this a bunch of times, but I personally think that let me just get this
one platform,
here.
any
But
website, unlimited
for a
creation.
while, I think the only guy that could really possibly contend with him would be a John Jones or a Francis Ngannou. And even for John Jones, I don't think it's super likely that that John would beat Tom. I think Tom's going to be a champ for a while. I think the skill he has is just kind of head and shoulders above everybody else in that weight class. He's also super physical. I know I talk about this all the time, but it is true. I mean, he's super physical, and that sort of physicality. Sorry.
Goodbye, MMA
That
fight.
sort of
With John-
that sort of physicality really does play big, especially at the heavyweight division. So I do personally believe that Tom is going to be a champion for a while. But I thought this was an interesting video we can react to and see. But yeah. By the way, before we get the video started, this video is by Tony Has Died. We've reacted to a couple of videos in the past on live streams about him, so be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and yeah. So let's get into it.
Jones fleeing the UFC, running away from the division, being the coward that he is. He's going on to pursue being a criminal full time, right? Now that John Jones is finally gone.
Yeah, that's fair. The Francis that fought Stipe would have been a real challenge. I think the by the way, is this not right? Okay, never mind. By the way, I think the Francis that fought Stipe versus Tom Aspinall honestly would be one of the better fights that we could have seen at the heavyweight division. I mean, even still at this point, I think current Francis versus Tom is still a great fight. But yes, I mean, you do have a point. He is a little bit older at this point. And who knows? He also has not been active at all over the last couple of years. He fought in boxing a couple times. He fought MMA once in the past, however long it's been since he left the UFC. So obviously Tom would have that advantage as well, just being a lot more active and being a lot younger, being super physical, being faster for sure. But I think that's probably the toughest challenge, even though all those factors that I just mentioned, I still think it's probably the toughest challenge for Tom Aspinall. I think Francis's wrestling has made significant strides, significant improvements. Obviously, he hits really hard. And although he's not super fast on the feet, I think he has moments of explosion where he throws a couple shots pretty quickly. And yeah. He's looking fat now. He is looking fat now, yeah. But going into a Tom Aspinall fight, I would obviously assume that he would be training pretty hard. He'll be getting in a better shape. But yeah.
We can talk about the future of the heavyweight division. And by that, I mean who is most likely to defeat Tom Aspinall. Now, we look at the heavyweight division, and I will say this: it looks bleak. It looks very dark. But I, Tony has died, am going to tell you who I think is most likely to defeat Tom Aspinall. When I say that the future of heavyweight is bleak, I don't mean that Tom Aspinall is a bad champion. What I mean is there are very few competitive matchups for Tom Aspinall left at this point, because we have seen what Tom Aspinall is able to do to anybody that lacks a certain level of skill. So coming in a dead last on this list is everybody else: Riz Vankuniev, Martin Budai, Taliesin Teixeira, Mick Parkin, Shamil Blabgaziev, Taco Bell Tuivasa, Derek Lewis, Sergey Spivak, Ty Bora, Waldo Cortez Acosta, and
State
Curtis
of the heavyweight
Blades.
division is ridiculous.
All of these people stand absolutely no chance against Tom Aspinall and would get flatlined by him in about 20 seconds. So that's what makes me look at this. I look at the heavyweight rankings and I think, all right, Shamil Gaziev, he's 2 fights from the title. We got Waldo Cortez Acosta. He's 1 fight from the title. The rest of the division is looking bleak, man. It's looking really scary. But yeah, none of these people stand any chance. Now I know what you're, dude. I can already see the comments. Bro, Blades already beat him once. He already beat him once. Shut up. Everybody that I just listed stands no chance against Tom Aspinall. 0% chance of winning. And so, yeah, the next person who I think is least likely to beat Tom Aspinall is Cyril Gahn, which is most likely going to be the next matchup that gets.
Yeah, Gahn's not going to beat Tom. I agree, though. This is probably going to be the next fight. But on the feet, Gahn can obviously have success. But I just think Tom's going to be able to find a takedown and submit him relatively easily. There's just such a big advantage for Aspinall in the wrestling against Gahn, again, which is happened to be the case as well when Gahn went up against Sean Jones. So yeah, I don't really think he has much of a chance. But yeah, let's see. All right, so let's just do it this way. The next guy that he has is not there is Sergey Pavlovich. Which, listen, I think Tom will beat him again. Sergey had some moments against thanks so much, bro. MMA. No, it's all good. I appreciate you just for being here. Thanks so much for being in stream and asking questions and whatnot. But yeah, all good though. Don't worry. But I appreciate you for even trying to drop your super chat. I really do appreciate that a lot. It means a lot. And thanks so much, by the way. But yeah, so the next guy would be Sergey Pavlovich. Yes, obviously. What's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. But for Sergey, yes, obviously they did fight. Yes, Tom Aspinall did win. And I think Tom would probably win again. I think this time around he'll probably look to wrestle a little bit more against Sergey if they did fight again. I don't think they would, but theoretically, if they did. But at the same time, Sergey has really fast hands. He has good boxing. He hits really hard. So, and he even hurt Tom Aspinall in their fight a little bit. So yes, Sergey could theoretically win, but I would definitely favor Tom Aspinall. This was hilarious, by the way. this image was hilarious. I'm kind of just skimming through this video a little bit. But the next guy, what's his face? Volkov. I don't think Volkov has much of a chance either. Obviously, Tom already beat him in the past, and I think he'll probably do the same thing again. Volkov has improved in the wrestling. He has improved in terms of his jiu-jitsu as well. So maybe he'll be able to put up a little bit more resistance in the wrestling against Tom. But at the end of the day, I think Tom's wrestling ability and his jiu-jitsu is still far above where Volkov is at this point. And even on the feet, Volkov does a good job when he's fighting at range, throwing a bunch of leg kicks, throwing a bunch of body kicks, maybe a couple of jabs, left straights. That's really where he has success, when it's kind of a slower pace fight and, he's kind of able to pick his opponents apart. That's why he had a lot of success against Sergey Pavlovich. But, in a fight against Tom Aspinall, Tom's going to be pushing forward at 100 miles an hour. So Tom's going to force chaos. And in a chaotic sort of stand up fight, I think Tom's eventually going to be able to land a big shot. And I think he'll be able to find a TKO finish if he wants to on the feet. Or, as I said, if he wants to just find a takedown and get a submission eventually, I think he'll be able to do that as well. But after that, we have Alex Pereira. I think this is, there's danger with Alex Pereira, but at the end of the day, similar to Cyril Gane, Alex Pereira just, he doesn't really have the wrestling. He did show good takedown defense against Ankalaev, but Tom Aspinall is a very different wrestler than Ankalaev is. He's a better wrestler for one, and also for two, probably has, 20, 30, 40 pounds on Ankalaev. So I definitely think he would beat Alex. I think he'll take him down and finish him. Of course, there is that danger. Alex hits really hard. He has that legendary left hook with all the extra powers. Could possibly play a factor, but I think Tom would definitely beat him. Anyways, it's crazy like Sergey Pavlovich is as just like but I'm guessing. Yeah, no, he's not from Dagestan. He doesn't really have the wrestling of those other guys. So I think Tom probably would have a wrestling advantage if he wanted to. In the first fight, it was all striking, but yeah. What's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. I apologize for the ads. I'm just trying to just grow a little bit and do that. But I apologize if that made you upset. But anyways, next we have, who else do we have? Charlton Almeida.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base
sure,
44.
Like Curtis Blades.
Yes, but for Charlton Almeida, it's I don't know. It just, against most of these guys at the heavyweight division, the reason why I think Tom is going to be a champion for so long is he has like some sort of advantage against everybody, whether it's on the feet or whether it's on the ground. For Charlton, I think it's a big advantage for Tom on the feet. On the feet, I just think Tom hits way too hard, is a little bit too skilled, is a little bit too fast, and Charlton is a little bit raw in terms of his striking. So I think in the end, Tom will be able to land a couple big shots and finish Charlton. The thing about Charlton, though, is obviously his grappling is really good. He's a good wrestler. He has good jiu-jitsu. And maybe he can possibly give Tom some problems on the ground. He was able to throw around Curtis Blades in the first round of their fight, which is pretty crazy. I mean, Curtis Blades is 250 plus, 260 plus. So that was pretty crazy. And he has the strength and he has the ability to possibly wrestle and take down Tom Aspinall. But as I said, I just think at the end of the day, Tom is just a little bit too good in terms of his striking and speed and his power, and it's just going to be a little bit too much for Charlton, and I still would favor Aspinall on that. The last one is Francis. We kind of talked about this before. I think this is by far the toughest test or potential test for Tom Aspinall. Francis Ngannou is he's a relatively complete fighter. Yes, he is a little bit old at this point. As you said earlier in chat, yes, he is a little bit fat at this point. He's been pretty inactive and all that. But with all that being said, I still do think that Francis Ngannou has the best ability to possibly beat Tom Aspinall as compared to anybody else, and that is including John Jones. For Francis on the feet, obviously he hits ridiculously hard. He's not super fast, and it will be hard to land on Tom Aspinall. Tom's going to be, decently faster than Ngannou will be, but still, Ngannou has good striking, and I think he could potentially land on Tom Aspinall. And even in terms of the wrestling, I think I might honestly give the edge to Ngannou. Possibly, it'll be close, but as we talked about a little bit before, ever since the second Stipe fight, Francis's wrestling has looked significantly improved. And yes, at this point he is older, and yes, at this point he hasn't fought in a while. He's been pretty inactive, but I still think at the same time he has, good skill. There's not one area that I think Tom washes Francis Ngannou. So I think there's a real chance Ngannou could still win even at this point. And all right, now we're getting a little ridiculous. Uncle Live, I don't think he's going to move up to heavyweight. And yeah, that's the video. But anyways, I apologize for kind of just skimming through this video a little bit, um, but yeah, so this video is by Tony Has Died. So if you guys want to check out some of his more content, I've been reacting to some of his content lately. Pretty good videos and whatnot. I was just kind of skimming through it this time, but be sure to subscribe to him, hit the like button, and whatnot. But yeah, John says, ways to make money somehow. Yeah, I mean, I apologize, guys, if it is a big issue about the ads. I mean, I guess I could theoretically turn it off. As he said, I don't have many viewers in here, but I'm just trying to, as I said, I'm just trying to get a new computer because this thing like freezes up every so often. So yes, it's not much money coming in from YouTube at this point, but I'm trying to just kind of just trying to do whatever I can at this point. But I apologize if it's annoying. Plus there's called skip ads. I don't ask you talking skip ads. Yeah. Yeah, I apologize, but usually the ads are like 5 seconds or something for a live stream. But yeah, I apologize. But anyways, I hope you guys are enjoying the stream. If you are enjoying the stream, be sure to hit that like button. It does help me out a lot, obviously. I guess it's a weird time, but might as well. And if you guys wanted to, feel free to drop a super chat. Obviously, no obligation or anything. I appreciate you guys just for being here, but just wanted to shout those couple things out. But yeah, I mean, obviously, as I said, not too much news that came out yesterday or ever since yesterday's live stream. But yeah, we have this upcoming fight tomorrow. As I touched upon a bunch of times, this card is not like, I wouldn't consider it to be a good card. There's some like decently fun fights, and maybe the main event has some meaning in terms of rankings. If what's it called? If Talison's able to win, he'll probably be pushed quickly throughout the rankings and able to get 1 or 2 more fights, and I'm sure they'll have a pretty big push for him. But outside of that, I think most of the other fights that don't really matter that much in terms of rankings, they're kind of just fun fights. But yeah, bro, you should be more open to more ideas. The UFC needs to mix it up more, like a ladder match. Getting booked, bro. He's talking about the ladder match yesterday as well. But yeah, I don't know. Call Dana White. Ask him if he wants to do a ladder match for title events. I think it'd be a great idea. But they need more creative thinking. It's boring. Just doing the same old thing again, bro. Yeah, bro. You're right. When you're right, you're right. Joshua, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. Welcome. John, listen, John's got to be a point. But I mean, Rick's obviously got you always laugh like it's ridiculous, but it's possible, bro. It can work in any content, seriously. Sure. I mean, I don't know. Ask or push the idea. I mean, they are partnered with the WWE, at least in some extent. So maybe there'll be some cross pollination, and we'll see it. Well, you never know. I mean, I guess they kind of do it to a certain extent when guys win titles or fights, they usually get on top of the what's it called, the cage. So I guess this wouldn't be too different from that. After you get a KO or a TKO, you have a time slot instead for the ladder, and you grab the belt. If you were 5s in time, that's gonna be a lot of damage. For submission, he would be allowed a time frame to really grab the belt. That's fair. Listen, these are good ideas. But yeah, maybe we'll be seeing it, and some sort of a ladder match in the UFC. But yeah, as I was talking about for this upcoming card. There's not much meaning for it, but we didn't have a fight last week, so we're getting a fight this week. It's not in the Apex, which is great. Derek Lewis is on the card. I mean, what more do you want? But yeah, I mean, there's some fun fights. I think this card has a chance to be to over deliver what maybe people may think going into it. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. But one other thing that I wanted to do is I promised John that we would react to a video why I hate the GOAT list debate. So let me pop that up and let's react. Get this hooked up. Oh yeah, no problem, bro. It's an interesting video. I would like to react to it anyway. All right. Let me throw my face here. Let's screen this. Eventually, I'll get better at this. I'll get
releasing a UFC GOAT list. I thought I'd go why I hate the UFC GOAT list.
Anyways, this is obviously, as you can see, why I hate the UFC GOAT list. Hell in the Cell MMA style. Oh wow, that would be interesting. Anyways, let's get into it.
List, why I hate the debate, why I hate the idea of it. And the first reason is the GOAT list is way too subjective. I've got 4 different lists from GOAT number 1 to GOAT number 5, just a top 5 GOAT list. What do you notice about all of these lists? First thing, completely different fighters and orders. It's a complete different mix and match. Yes, there'll be some fighters who feature in different lists because they have to, but it's a completely different order. The second thing is they're all fairly acceptable. Despite being different fighters, different orders, all jumbled up, they're all fairly acceptable. What I'm trying to say is the entire GOAT list is literally just a bundle of the exact same fighters in everyone's list. The only difference is some of the orders might be different by 2 or 3 spots. It's just the same jumble of fighters. You don't need to explain why they're great. And on top of that, there's no criteria. Some people might favor resume, which is where they might have Makachev or Topuria or Volkanovski quite high. Some people might have defenses, which is where
it is true. I know John was talking about this before, but it is true. I mean, everybody has different criteria of what they think or who they think is going to be the GOAT list. Essentially, everybody's top 10 is usually basically the same guys, maybe just in a slightly different order based on, as he's talking about in the video, like what you prioritize more, defenses, title, or number of belts, or whatever, value or caliber of wins or whatever. So everybody's GOAT list is the same, but like with slight differences. So I agree with this video. I agree with you, John, as well, that it's almost pointless because it's like the lists are basically the same. Yeah, I mean, listen, the UFC has been a little bit boring lately. I do agree with you, Rick. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, the next thing that I'm really excited about is the Abu Dhabi card coming up. I think that's going to be a fun one. And then after that, it's Hamzat Cherkis. I think that'll be a good one. But the UFC does need to put on more big fights. I do agree. There aren't any big rival. Dude, I was talking about, wow, that's a great point, John, by the way. I was talking about that a little while ago. I think I made a video on it as well. In when I believe the video is called "The UFC is Dying" or whatever it was. But I was talking about rivalries. A huge reason for why the UFC was so big at a certain point, or I don't know if so big, it's probably even a little bit bigger now. But a huge reason for why in 2016 and in that era there was a lot of excitement in fights is because there were so many rivalries. Conor, Khabib. Stipe and DC, even to a lesser extent, DC and John Jones, even Conor and Nate Diaz. There's just so many different rivalries, but at this point, there's really none. The only one that I could possibly say is Topuria versus Islam, but it just seems like that fight is going to be so hard to get. Islam's fighting for the 170-pound belt. Ilya already moved up to 155. It seems like his next fight is going to be up against one of the 3 of Paddy, Arman, or Gaethje. And for Islam, if he wins the belt at 170, maybe he retires, or maybe he fights another guy at 170, not named Topuria, or maybe if he loses at 170, then I don't know. Does he retire at that point? Does he, fight at 170 going forward? There's just so many moving parts, and it seems like it'll be hard to get that fight. But outside of Islam versus Topuria, I don't really know what other guys could potentially even be a rivalry. Maybe it could be, I don't know, maybe it could be DDP Dricus, but I don't even know about that one. I mean, I think the fight itself is an amazing fight, but a rivalry, I don't know. I guess it could be. Maybe that could be one. Probably seeing in the media that's talking about I personally thought that their first two fights were pretty good, but at the same time, I do agree. I don't really care about women's MMA or women's boxing that much. At least Patty and Ilya are building up the fight, but I don't see Patty having success. Yeah, I don't either, John. I agree with you. I think Ilya's just gonna win. He'll land a big shot, and I think he'll be able to find a TKO on Patty. That's how I see that fight going. But maybe you can have a Ilya versus Patty like rivalry, but I think it's just going to be one fight, and yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be too big for rivalry there. Rick says boring. I do agree that that women's MMA or women's boxing is not fun. If Islam beats JDM, Ilya beats Patty or Armin, how many pay-per-views do you think Islam will sell? How many pay-per-views will it sell? I don't know, honestly, but it's going to sell like a ridiculous amount of pay-per-views, at least for today's level. Maybe the amount of pay-per-views sold is, the bar is a lot lower now than it was in 2016, because in 2016 they had Connor, they had less illegal streams and whatnot. So maybe the bar is lower at this point. But whatever constitute as a successful pay-per-view sale or successful pay-per-view sales at this point, Ilya versus Islam would blow through that. That's by far the biggest fight that we've had in a very long time. Because even for Conor Khabib, that fight was ridiculously huge, obviously, but I think a lot of people going into that thought that Khabib had a real advantage and he would be able to win via the wrestling. But Ilya versus Islam, I think it's a really good fight because both of these guys are essentially undefeated. Islam lost a little bit early on in his career, but they're both essentially undefeated. They're on very long win streaks. They both have been champion. They're both probably in the primes of their careers right now. They're both clearly the two best fighters in the UFC. They have a beef, it appears. And yeah, I really think that would be a great fight to put together. But yeah. I've actually been getting too much. It's the only other. Yeah, it's fair. Like pro crimes. That's fair. That's pretty fun. Back in the day, I was a little bit into that, but I could definitely see how it could be entertaining. But yeah, the UFC needs rivalries. I think that's really the key to making the sport more fun. Alongside with maybe going to new arenas and going different places. That's why I think the White House would be a really fun thing, because it kind of forces the UFC's hand. They have to make that card great. And also it's a completely new venue, something that we've never seen before. So I think there's excitement for that. I think, for example, when they went to the Sphere, the card itself wasn't amazing, but it was kind of unfortunate. It turned out to be not amazing. But in terms of the venue itself and how the fights turned out, it actually turned out to be really fun. Do you think the White House card it's a good question. At this point, I mean, it's pretty far out at this point, and I guess there are a lot of questions of how it would look and what the card will be like. So I'm going to say probably no, just because UFC 300 was legendary. The main card was ridiculously good. The first fight of the prelims had Cody Garbrandt and Davison Figueiredo, two former champions, and still at this point, they're still pretty good fighters. So I think UFC 300 was just on another level. I thought it was like a ridiculously good card. It also over delivered somehow because of some of the fights. The Pereira fight was really good against Jamal Hill. The Max Holloway fight against Gaethje was one of the best knockouts I've ever seen, probably the best knockout I've ever seen. But that card was just another level. I'm sure for the White House card, they're gonna put together a really fun card. I know Connor, there was recently, it came out yesterday when he was doing his press conference with BKFC, but he was talking about how it seems like he's going to go to the White House next. So he's talking about fighting on that card. As I said with Connor, like it would be cool to see him fight, but I kind of don't believe him until I see him walk in the octagon at this point. It kind of got to that level. UFC 300 was epic. It really was. That was probably the best card that I've seen, like the most recent card that was the best that I've seen. It's got to be that one. Maybe that might have been the best card I've ever watched, honestly. It was really good. But anyways, I apologize, John, for pausing for so long. Let's get back into it.
Which is where you want to favor towards Mighty Mouse and John Jones and Anderson Silva. Some people might like the perfect record, guys like fighters like Khabib and GSP. Some people might like skill, like Arman Sarukian and Peter Yan. Some people might favor longevity with fighters like Aldo and John Jones and Fedor. Some people might favor pioneerism with like guys like McGregor and Royce Gracie. Some people might have absolutely no tolerance for steroids, and the second steroids are brought up, no tolerance. Some people just dismiss steroids. They don't care about it. It doesn't enter the discussion. You know, you can say Jones is the GOAT, but he's taken steroids. You can say Mighty Mouse is the GOAT. Who's he beat? You can say Topuria is the GOAT, but he's got one defense. You can say Silva's the GOAT, but he's got 11 losses. Every GOAT has asterisks as well. And I feel like GOAT lists as well nowadays. It isn't about who made the best list, who had the best placements. It's just who had the least diabolical names on their list, who had the worst, who had the less amount of bad placements, who had the least diabolical names on their GOAT list.
That's fair. I also almost think that some YouTubers may purposely make like a ridiculous list just to get more attention or whatever. But I do agree with when you're determining whose GOAT list is best is who had the least amount of like ridiculous names on the list. But yeah, listen, everybody has their own, ideas of who their GOAT is and their own criteria, and it doesn't really matter. Everybody says basically the same amount of 10 guys or 15 guys.
You could have had the most perfect list known to man, literally by statistics, but you're still going to get called a casual. You're still going to say, how is this dude over this dude? This guy's way too high, this guy's way too low. So number one,
your marketing, sales, and HR teams can reuse
and
remix.
Should I click off the video now, chat? There's an ad. Kidding.
Sometimes I imagine what I'd write today for my dear friend Martin.
I just think the GOAT list is way too subjective. There's no right or wrong answer. It's the exact same fighters in everybody's top 10, top 15, just jumbled about in different positions. There's no need to explain it. And when there is an anomaly, that's where it just starts a bit of a conversation. But generally, it's just way too subjective and it's getting boring. Second reason is you can't really compare modern fighters to older generation fighters. There's this kind of new debate going around that modern fighters should be favored.
This is a great call out. I think this is true in every sport, honestly. When you talk about, let's say basketball, when you talk about basketball players that used to play 20 years ago or 30 or 40, 50 years ago, whatever, compared to now, obviously the skill level right now is better. But it doesn't mean that players now, like individual players now, are better than some individual players back then. And I think the same could be said about MMA. At this point, per capita, I guess if you want to say that word, per capita, the UFC is more talented at this point than they were, maybe 10 years ago or longer. Well, probably longer than 10. But anyways, they're probably better per capita. But it doesn't mean that, some individual fighters back then weren't better than some guys now, obviously, if that makes sense.
Over older fighters. I disagree. Now, skill-wise, 100% goes without saying. Modern fighters of this generation are way better back then than where they were back then in terms of skill. But let's take Anderson Silva, for example. He isn't as skilled as today's top middleweights, even though he was massively ahead of his time, and I still think he could compete with some guys in the current middleweight division. It's no surprise the sport has evolved, skill has evolved, and fighters nowadays are just better than how Anderson Silva was. But he still dominated his era of middleweight, setting records, was absolutely ahead of his time. And then you might say, okay, but all middleweights back then sucked. Doesn't that make it more impressive for Anderson Silva to be so far ahead of every middleweight in his era? I mean,
that's a fair point. I also think in terms of like a ridiculous amount of title defenses like Silva had or maybe some other guys had, I just don't think that's that's realistic at this point. I think guys are just too good, and regardless of how good you are, I know Topuria, a lot of people seem to think he's unbeatable. Eventually, somebody's going to come along and beat him. So I think those ridiculously long win streaks, 10 or title defenses, 10 title defenses, 8 title defenses, whatever, I just don't think is super realistic at this point.
I mean, you look at the conversations online about Anderson Silva against today's middleweight division, and a lot of people still think he could compete with even like the title contenders in the top 5. And talking of the middleweight division, this was the middleweight top 6 this was the middleweight top 6 4 years ago, by the way, so it hasn't evolved that much. But for example, let's take Chuck Liddell and Khalil Roundtree, both guys who fought in the light heavyweight division. Who wins in a fight? It's Khalil Roundtree. Who's more skilled? It's Khalil Roundtree. Who beat more skilled opponents? It's Khalil Roundtree. But surely that means Roundtree's better, right? No, it doesn't, because Chuck Liddell obviously defended his belt multiple times, was a champion, a pioneer of the sport, and even though Roundtree's more skilled in every aspect, Chuck Liddell's still a greater fighter. And you might say that modern fighters should be favored over older fighters. Yes, in the pound for pound debate, they should be, because it's about skill in the pound for pound debate. But in the GOAT debate, I don't think you can really compare them. So my second argument is that you can't really compare modern fighters to older gen fighters, because there's a skill differential. It's different eras. It's hard to kind of intervene between the different eras. So that's my second reason. Third one is the list updates way too often for it to have any legitimacy. The UFC's been around for 31 years. How can there be a new GOAT list every 6 months? I understand the UFC is still fairly green, but for there to be a new list like every 3 to 6 months when the sport's been around for so long, Dricus du Plessis 2 fights ago wasn't even in the top 50 of most people's list. Now he's considered in the top 15. Some people might even go as far to say he's in the top 10. The new method for a GOAT list is there'll be a new UFC champion. They'll defend 2 to 3 times, and suddenly they're one of the greatest of all time in the top 20 because...
This is so true, actually. This is so true. We see this a lot, actually. Where Merab is the thing about Merab, I guess maybe that's a bad example, but he's on a ridiculously long win streak alongside with it. But we do see it a lot of times when guys, get the belt and they defend 2 or 3 times, all of a sudden they're considered to be one of the GOATs of their division and maybe a top 20 GOAT, as you said in the video, of all time. But yeah, going back to the point about that, you're so boring. Yeah. I agree. I think before UFC 317, the UFC was in a really bad point. I thought it was pretty boring. But that card did deliver. It was a fun card. Topuria is the champ at 155. Regardless of how you feel about Topuria himself, I think the fact that he is, a two weight class champion at this point, and he's the champion of 155, kind of just makes the sport a little bit more exciting, and some more things to talk about, and obviously now we can fantasize about potentially getting Ilya versus Islam. It's still a lot of moving parts, but we're a little bit closer to it at this point. But even with that being said, there's no real rivalries at this point, and there is a lot of boringness when it comes to the UFC at this point. I still would agree with that.
As modern fighters are over older fighters, and this is a hot take apparently nowadays. Like Anderson Silva, for example, people say he's overrated. From 2016 to 2021, it was the same fighters in the GOAT debate, the same fighters you'd expect, the same legends. Now suddenly in 2024 and 2025, there's this whole new wave of fighters entering the GOAT list. A new champion defends 2 or 3 times, and they're now one of the greatest of all time. I think GOAT list should at minimum be a yearly thing, not every 3 months, because then it takes away the legitimacy of a list. That's like Khabib retires, now suddenly he's a GOAT. Volk nearly beats Islam, now suddenly he's the GOAT. Islam remains the champion since beating Moicano. Now he's the GOAT. And now Tuco Tacos exists. Now people are calling him the GOAT. So just wait for things to get moving. I think the list updates way too often for it to have any legitimacy. If it's a GOAT list, it should be towards the end of their career, which brings me on to my 4th point, which is most GOAT lists have bias or intentional rage bait. Like we said before, the GOAT list is literally just a bunch.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before. I think a lot of guys on X or on YouTube purposely put like random guys in there to get more attention or rage bait.
Of the exact same fighters in every list, mixed and matched. If every GOAT list didn't have an anomaly, they'd be pointless. There'd be no discussion, and they'd be boring without an anomaly. So I feel like nowadays it's kind of common to rage bait. Like everyone knows GSP is one of the GOATs. Everyone knows Makachev is. Everybody knows Fedor is. So now they've got to slide in different fighters who are out of place just to get a conversation sparking. Because let's be honest, if every list was the same, it would be boring. So they just take any decent fighter on the roster and slide them in the GOAT list, or they'll say a hot take and they'll just display a take that's awful, or they'll downplay fighters. They'll say things like Aldo's not a GOAT, he lost 10 times, but then they'll glaze Topuria, who hasn't even got an ounce of Aldo's longevity. They'll say things like Demetrius Johnson's overrated, but then they'll caress Pantoja, who has 2 good names on his resume as well. They'll say, GSP ain't even in the top 10, but then they'll pay for a twitted playcheck. Or they'll say things like Usman's over GSP. I just feel like nowadays it's not about, like I said at the beginning, not about who has the better list, who can have the most bad takes in the list and spark a discussion over it more. So most of them, they have bias or intentional rage bait to get people talking about them, because let's be honest, if it was a legitimate GOAT list that was fair, no one would be talking about it. I'd have no conversation around it. Number 5.
fellas.
You can't really include fighters who are in the middle of their career. For example, I keep talking about Anderson Silva. Let's say Anderson Silva and Ilia Topuria. I think most people nowadays would conclude.
Oh, I didn't see your comment. I don't know if you sent that a while ago. Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. Here we go.
That Topuria is greater than Silva, and I'm not necessarily dismissing that. But if Anderson Silva retired after beating Stephan Bonner, on that big winning streak at 33-4, I think most people would definitely consider Anderson Silva greater than Topuria, and probably
I think. I also think they have like a different definition of greatness. At the time. Well, I mean, Silva also didn't have the ability to fight some of the caliber of guys that Topuria does. But I think for Topuria, he doesn't care at all about longevity. I think it's pretty obvious, actually. He has one title defense at 145, and he wanted to move up. I think for Topuria, I've said this a bunch of times, but for Topuria, his sense of greatness is, becoming a 3-division champ. He's already a 2-division champ. I think he wants to be a 3-division champ, and I think he wants to beat the best possible names along the way in the most impressive fashion. He wants to knock out Islam. He wants to be that 3-division champ. He wants to knock out any other legends along the way. If he can beat Paddy, I mean, Paddy's a relatively big name. He's not a huge name, but I think that's more of a fact that he doesn't like Paddy. That's why he wants to fight him. But in terms of, Gaethje, I mean, he's a pretty big name. I'm sure Ilya would want to have him on his resume. Poirier doesn't seem likely, but theoretically, I think if Poirier was an option, that would be a good name to Poirier to have on his list. Just a bunch of guys that have big names and guys that have had a lot of success over the years. Poirier wants to beat those guys, and he wants to beat those guys in dominant fashion. First round, second round, third round, TKO or KO finishes. That's what he's looking for. And outside of that, as I said, he wants to be a 3-division champ. He wants to be the first guy ever to do that. So my point is, Topuria doesn't really care about longevity. Anderson Silva, obviously, he has ridiculous longevity. So it's kind of just a difference. And what he was talking about before in when saying that everybody has different criteria in determining a GOAT. Or whatever, I think it's apparently obvious, at least between these two guys. It's a pretty good comparison, actually. For Silva, it's obviously title defenses. For Topuria, it's big names and multiple belts.
The top 3, maybe the number 1 greatest of all time. And look at Khabib, for example. This guy retired mid-career. The narrative when he was active and when he immediately retired was he's the GOAT, he's top 5 of all time, he's got the perfect record. I mean, look at the comment section under his retirement video. Everyone's calling him the GOAT. Undisputed, undeniable GOAT. The narrative now around Khabib is that he's not even in the top 10. He's overrated. He beat nobody. Let's use Ilia Topuria for another example. The narrative now around Topuria is he's top 7, maybe top 5, already one of the GOATs. What if he retired today? Because I can guarantee a couple of years from now, the debate about Topuria would be different. And it's just recency biased. Topuria's got a lot of momentum right now, and I'm just using Topuria as an example. Fighters nowadays that have a lot of momentum, people kind of ride on the momentum and look at the potential legacy that they can have, and then immediately exclaim that they're one of the greatest of all time. But if Topuria got chinned in his next fight by a different contender, or Islam Makhachev was to beat Ilia Topuria, even though that's not a shameful thing to do, I can guarantee people would be downplaying their placement of Ilia Topuria on the GOAT debate, saying he was never that good. Look at BJ Penn. He's a perfect example. BJ Penn's never mentioned in the GOAT list nowadays, but if he retired at 16-7, he'd be in the top 10 because of what he accomplished in the sport and how he beat so many different fighters across weight classes. And this means you're not ranking career versus career. You're ranking somebody's prime versus somebody else's entire career. Like, for example, Anderson Silva's discredited because of the end of his career and the amount of losses he took. You can't really discredit Topuria for that reason because he hasn't really had a career that long to go on for. Like a lot of fighters nowadays, it's just too early to call them GOATs when we don't know what the future holds. And these are the same people that will critique the losses of like Aldo and Silva, people who stayed around for so long. And you can easily just argue that and say, it's easy, we'll just change the GOAT list if they lose, no big deal. That goes back to my original point. The list updates way too often for it to have any legitimacy. So number 5, you can't really include fighters who are mid-career. It's unfair on fighters who have been around for a long time and have had long longevity. So wait for their career to be over. Number 6, and this is going to be a real quick one. How can you be a GOAT past the top 15? Like I said, you can't include fighters who are in the middle of their career, but you're either a GOAT or you're not. There's no in between. Like the debate about Cejudo or Adesanya, who's number 17 on the GOAT list? Neither of them, because they ain't GOATs. How can number 27 on somebody's GOAT list be a GOAT? You ain't a GOAT. Get away from the conversation. That's just a quick point. You can't really be a GOAT past the top 15. I think the GOAT list should be subjected to the top 15 or at least the top 10. So how I think the GOAT debate should be is, first of all, all the real GOATs, the ones that everyone can recognize and agree with, should be categorized as one. It's too subjective to rank. You can't argue that Demetrius Johnson's above John Jones. You can't argue that John Jones is above GSP. You can't argue that GSP is above Makhachev. You can't argue that Makhachev's above DJ. They're all as one. They're all good, and for many different reasons, it's too subjective. You know what I mean? I'm not bothered about who you have in your GOAT list. As long as it's the same fighters, I think they should all be categorized as one in the GOAT conversation. Number two, I think it's much easier to rank it by division. It's much easier to rank the GOATs of every division in some sort of actual list from top to bottom than it is in general. For example, how can you compare a modern bantamweight like Merab to an old middleweight like Anderson Silva? You've got to take into account every subjective, I guess, category, as well as the stage of their career, the era that they're in, and the division that they're in as well. So it's much easier to rank by division. And third, skill should never be the leading factor. This isn't a pound for pound debate. No shit. Fighters nowadays are more skilled than they were 20 years ago. Does that mean they're greater? No, it doesn't, because again, the sport's evolved over time.
I think this is also a good thought, because, when people are talking about the current pound for pound rankings, guys at 125 are obviously going to be more skilled than guys at heavyweight. So I think this is kind of a similar thing. But yeah.
The fighters that the GOATs back then were fighting have now evolved, and the GOATs themselves have now evolved. So I don't think skill should be a leading factor. I'm not bothered if you want to include it, because obviously skill is relevant, but I don't think it should be a leading factor in the GOAT debate. But that's just some reasons why I hate the idea of this GOAT conversation. It's just a bit boring. It's the same shit.
But yeah, anyways, so if you guys enjoy the video, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. I like his stuff. But yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of good points. I know a lot of people have their GOAT lists, and they say John Jones is the GOAT, and somebody else says he's not the GOAT because he's on PEDs or whatever. Everybody always has their different reasons and whatever. And it is kind of just a silly debate, in my opinion. It kind of just a little bit boring after a while. Because whatever, everybody has their own opinion, and I guess it is what it is. So thanks, John, for the recommendation. It was a pretty good and interesting video to react to. I do appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, what do we got? We just got the card coming up this weekend. For me personally, I mean, listen, this card, I'm going to watch this card. I'm hoping it's going to be pretty good. I think, as I said, there's going to be a good amount of action on some of these fights. But, it's kind of like a whatever card. For UFC 318, it also kind of is a whatever card, honestly. It's just, there's some fun fights. Holloway versus Poirier is going to be a really fun fight. Paulo versus Kopylov could be good. Holland versus D-Rod's most likely going to be good. Ige versus Pitbull could be good. Johnson versus Elhuber is most likely going to be good. But, most of these guys are kind of just lower in the rankings. There's no amazing fights on this card. And even on the prelims, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, Vinicius Oliveira versus Kyler Phillips may have the most amount of meaning in terms of rankings, more so than some fights on the main card. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not super excited for UFC 318 either. You're welcome. By the way, thanks once again, John. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, UFC 318 is not a card that I'm super excited for either. The real one that I'm excited about is UFC Abu Dhabi, the fight night between Whitaker and RDR. That fight is a legitimately really good fight. The question is, can RDR continue with his plot armor? Can he continue to, just win? Can he get a takedown on Whitaker? Can he get in the clinch and land knees and elbows? Can that funky style of RDR on the feet, can he have success against a guy like Whitaker? There's a lot of questions to be answered. And if RDR is able to win, who knows? Maybe he'll get the next title shot. Well, probably not. It's probably either going to be Kaio or Imavov. But still, if he gets a win over Whitaker, he'll probably just need one more win to get a title shot. And imagine a potential fight between Whitaker or between RDR and Dricus du Plessis. How funny would that fight be? But I guess my point is this fight has real meaning, and also it's two guys that are pretty high level at this point. And then for Movsar Evloev versus Aaron Pico, I mean, this fight is ridiculously high level. Evloev obviously has been on a really long win streak, has really good skill, great wrestler. Even on the feet, he's pretty good. Aaron Pico's a newcomer, but he's a good wrestler as well, good jiu-jitsu skill, has a lot of power on the feet. So that's a really high-level fight, and this fight means something. It's a number one contender fight, most likely at least. for Volkanovski. So that's a good one. Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee is kind of a weird one. I mean, for Marcus McGee, it's a huge step up, obviously, and it's a huge opportunity. But for Peter Yan, fighting Marcus McGee is kind of like whatever. But I think that's an exciting fight just because Peter Yan's in it. He's a really exciting fighter and whatever. So that's a good fight. And then Bryce Mitchell and Nurmagomedov, I mean, that has some meaning, I guess. Shara and Marc-Andre Barrio, maybe not so much, but whatever. I don't know. I guess just my point is on this card, on the UFC Abu Dhabi card, there's like a bunch of fights that actually mean something, alongside with having a bunch of fights that have very high level caliber fighters on it. But when you talk about this upcoming weekend, and when you talk, or well, tomorrow I should say, and when you also talk about UFC 318, there's just not much there. And I think that's part of the problem with the UFC. We have a lot of these cards that come up that are just like whatever kind of cards, and I'm talking about pay-per-views that are just like whatever pay-per-views. There's some fights that are fun, like Dustin versus Max is going to be a fun fight, but it's kind of just like whatever. There's no championship fight on that card. There's no like number one contender fight on that card. There's no top 5 guys on that card, which is kind of crazy to say. I mean, I guess Max and Dustin are, but they're the main event. You want a title fight in that spot. So I don't know. Just too many whatever cards, and I think that's really where we get to a point where we're talking about the UFC being boring. So I would like to see better cards get put together. I want to see more UFC 300s, more cards like that, more UFC Noches that they were able to do in the Sphere last year. Like more cards like that would bring excitement and new venues, and also stack some of these cards. Try to look to build rivalries, build 2 guys that maybe don't like each other. Build one guy on one side, have him fight a couple guys. Hopefully he wins and hopefully he's skilled. And then his potential rival on the other side, have him fight a bunch of guys. And once they're both at the top, have them fight each other. Obviously, a lot easier said than done. There's a lot of moving parts, in doing that. But at the end of the day, the UFC just needs to do that and maybe push some guys a little bit more as well in terms of their stardom or potential stardom. There's just so many different things that I think the UFC could probably be doing better at this point. But it seems like it's just a work in progress. It's a slow work in progress. We were complaining about the UFC being in the Apex so much. To their credit, they haven't been in the Apex in a while, and a lot of these fight nights that are coming up are not in the Apex. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have back-to-back Apex cards after the UFC Abu Dhabi card, I believe, which is not great. But for the most part, they have not been going to the Apex, which is great. The next step is just, put together better pay-per-view cards. But I'll see. I guess we'll see what the UFC decides to do there in terms of that. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I kind of went into Imavov and Borralho and their fight. That should be a good one. UFC Paris should be a really good one, really fun one. So that's good in the UFC. This upcoming card, we'll see what happens. I'm not like super high on the card, but I think it could be fun. And yeah, we'll see. But yeah, we've been streaming for around like an hour and a half. If you guys have any last second questions, be sure to drop it in chat. But if not, I'll see you guys on Sunday. My next streaming time is going to be on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. As I said, also for everybody joining in, I stream during the week, every day during the week, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and yeah, on Sundays at 2. But yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, be sure to check out my new video that just came out today. Also, I'll be having another video coming out on Wednesday and Friday of next week. And yeah, I'll just be, continuing to grind on this YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys on Sunday. But I appreciate you guys for being here. Thanks, Joshua or John, for the video idea. And yeah, peace out, brothers.